Anybody, everybody? Just gonna hang up here for a minute and fix my hair and see if anyone joins up. Alright guys, I'm just going to go over a couple ideas I thought it'd be cool to share with you. Check out some stuff on banjo. So when you're starting out, most people are going to learn your basic roll patterns. Let's see what we got here. We got our alternating roll. Some call it the square roll or the box roll. Thumb, index, thumb, middle. It's a great pattern, really simple to do, great for easy chord changes. But something that you can do to kind of vary it up is you can either kind of reorganize it, like maybe instead of reading it thumb, index, thumb, middle, you could read middle, index, middle, thumb, index, thumb. So kind of doing it backwards. So at first, if we're doing that starting the beat, it sounds like this. The thumb is the dominant note. You know, right here is the G note. That's the note that kind of stands out because that's the one you're hitting on beat one. Hey there, whoever joined. If you want to go ahead and put what instrument you play in the chat there, I'll be able to read and be able to help you out with anything you want. Please do not be shy. I'm here to help however I can. Till the meantime, I'm going to keep going over this banjo stuff. Okay, so using the square roll, we're talking about, you know, the roll pattern is usually thumb, index, thumb, middle. And then we can reorganize that pattern. So instead of starting on the thumb, index, thumb, middle, we're doing middle, thumb, index, thumb. So it'll sound like this. Banjo advanced beginner, cool. So Kyle, like, what's like a song you're working on, or what have you been playing on banjo recently? What's a song, or what's maybe some rolls, or any kind of licks? What are you into? What do you want to learn? What do you want any help with? I think this is a cool thing. Like I'm talking about, just changing the pattern. So going from the square roll and just maybe starting on a different finger. So instead of thumb, index, thumb, middle, we could maybe do like middle, thumb, index, thumb. So. your backup and lead, and it'll just give a different feel to it, and it'll usually bring a different note out. Like I said, that first note when we're doing the square roll is that thumb. So usually, unless we're being really careful with how hard we hit each finger, that's going to be the strongest note that stands out the most. But if we switch it up and put our first finger first, all of a sudden the note that we're playing with the first finger, that B string, and that C note kind of becomes a dominant note, unless we're being really careful in accenting other offset notes. Okay, so single string whiskey before breakfast. Yeah, that's a good one. No, is that one? I don't have that app right next to me. Actually, I got my phone here. But is that one? Is that with capo or is that without capo? I'm gonna pull it up on the app so I can see kind of what the arrangement looks like. And is that one you're working on from TuneFox, or is that one you're making your own arrangement, or got from somewhere else? Just so I could maybe kind of give you some tips, or show you some cool licks you could add in or something. Before breakfast, single string. Without capo, okay. So is that, like I said, is that TuneFox arrangement, or is that one your TuneFox arrangement? Cool. Is there any parts in it that you're struggling with, or is it going pretty smooth? How long have you been working on it? I think I wrote this one. I can't remember if Bennett or I wrote this one. I'm just kind of looking it over. Yeah, let me know if any of the parts are harder than others, or if you could kind of pinpoint anything you're struggling with, or anything you're wanting to do with it. Were you just playing the bottom 3 strings? Do you mean when I was doing the roll? Doing the square roll? Yeah, I was just mainly on the first string, second string, and third string. But I mean, you can move fingers you can take that same concept that I was talking about, instead of going thumb, index, thumb, middle. That's the classic one. You could do index, thumb, index, middle, but I could move my finger positions. Hold on. So you can move these fingers to any strings, and if you're keeping that pattern, you can use the same pattern and get a new sound by switching strings, either just doing thumb, index, thumb, middle. So there I'm on the first 3 strings. Then I could move it and do the classic alternating. Or maybe something like this. Right, that's the same pattern, but using different strings. About 3 months I'm doing left hand position as current focus. Okay. Yeah, let me talk a little bit more about this roll thing since you asked about it. Then I'll talk about some left hand position stuff. But yeah, you can take the same pattern and either like change the strings you're playing on to get a different sound, or you can kind of rearrange the pattern. Like I said, instead of doing thumb, index, thumb, middle, we could do index, thumb, middle, thumb. Yeah, and I was playing on the first 3 strings, but like I said, I could move that thumb around, or move even my middle and my first finger around. You could play it in the middle strings. You could play it on the D, G, and B. Case, I'm kind of doing like an alternating middle finger. So starting on the middle, doing index, thumb, middle, thumb. But actually, in every other time, I'm hitting the high string with my middle finger. So. That'll just get you a cool backup sound, and it's like the alternating thumb, but in this case, this is a new roll we just came up with we're going to call the alternating middle finger roll, I guess. You know, it's the same concept, just organizing a little bit differently. Starting on the first finger, and then alternating that middle every other time. That's the first time. Second time. Yeah, okay, so that's, I think, kind of explains what I was talking about. And you can use that same concept to, like, and like, I'm going to get to left-hand position in just 1 second. But you can apply that same concept to, like, forward rolls. So usually you might do middle, index, thumb, index, middle, thumb, index, middle, thumb, middle. Thumb, index, middle, thumb, index, middle, thumb, middle. You could, that thumb, index, middle, thumb, index, middle, thumb, middle, you can use it, look at those as 3 different puzzle pieces, and you can mix them all up. So I could do thumb, middle, thumb, index, middle, thumb, index, middle. Okay? And that'll sound a little bit different. Right? Maybe it'll come out a little bit better in chord change. So here's playing the classic forward roll. Right, and here's where we're switching it up, putting that, instead of having that thumb middle at the end, we're moving that to the beginning. Right, it just changes the beat and the feel of it a little bit. Getting to left-hand position, it sort of depends on what you're playing at the moment. Usually I'll tell people it's totally okay to have that left thumb over top, although sometimes you might have it on the back if you've got maybe a bigger chord. But usually you don't want your hand completely flat. We want a little bit of an angle. If our hand's completely flat, then our fingers, just by their nature, can mainly only go up. We can kind of spread them out like that, but you're not going to be able to get very far. If you want to be able to reach down the neck this way, you got to put a little bit of angle in there so we can reach them out, okay? And the other thing you want to think about is your wrist position. So we usually don't want it pancaked up against the back of the neck. You want it kind of neutral. If it's out like that, that's kind of bad hand health, especially long term. It can cause some injuries. So I'm going to pull up. I'm going to have to move my little desk around here. Kind of go through Whiskey Before Breakfast, maybe piece by piece, and looking at how hand position might shift depending on what we're playing. So if we're looking at that first part, I'm going to start out about like this, right? You can see my hand's at a little bit of an angle. It's not totally flat. And if you got any questions in the middle of this, just put it in the chat, and we can get off on a little side notes whenever you want if there's something in a certain measure. But like I said, it's not totally flat. It's at a little bit of an angle. That way my fingers can kind of reach, right? If it's totally flat, then it's like I can barely get that 2-fret stretch. But if it's like this, you can see my fingers are at an angle, knuckles in there at an angle. It's not perpendicular, okay? And then my thumb's just kind of, it's not flat pushed down, it's just on a little bit of its side. And you don't want to be gripping very hard. So looking at the first measure. Alright. If you got your wrist in a decent position, you should be only moving your fingers. Maybe a slight, you can see a slight bit of wrist rotation as I'm going from the G string to the D string, but not much. Alright, so this first measure. Right, not a lot of movement there. Really just playing on the 2nd and 4th fret on the first 2 strings. Leaning up here, just checking the chat, seeing if there's anything I'm missing here. Cool. Like I said, Kyle, just interrupt me, man, if there's something else you want to talk about. All right, so moving on. So it kind of just repeats the same thing for the 3rd measure. No big position shifts. Hold on. I've got long fingers and just can't get the extension. Oh. I moved my left hand too much now. This helps. Cool. Yeah, long fingers. So the things that I run into the most, I'm turning sideways so you can see my hand position. Where I see people have problems, it's either having a flat hand against the neck when it needs to be at least a little angle for most stuff. For some complex chords, actually flat's better. Like if you're doing something like that, I don't even know what that is, but just like that kind of hand position, you kind of have to have a more flat hand. You can't do it with this. See, my pinky can't reach. So usually you want, like I said, a little bit of angle with the hand, and that's just rotating your forearm slightly, you know. Put your hand against it flat, and then rotate your forearm slightly, keep it relaxed, and you should be able to get a lot of reach. The other thing I see people do is you can see where I pull my hand back right there. Sometimes people have their hand too far back, and then this look, it's like I've got that much of my finger to use, right? And they're like, oh, I can't reach it. All right, so you need to move it a little bit forward. But you don't want to move too far forward. Sometimes you can get that neck all the way in the back of your hands. Then all of a sudden, you see how the fingers are coming down at an angle, right? So now my hand's too far forward. I've got to pull it back just a little bit so that that finger strikes almost perpendicular, right? You don't want it too high. If it looks like that, your hand's too far forward. If it looks like that, your hand's too far back. We got to find that middle ground. And it all depends on your hand, whether it's this far forward or that far forward, right? When we want it mostly perpendicular, at least that fingertip. I mean, it'll change depending on what string you're on too. So there's always going to be little changes. But I would say, like, think about the angle of your hand this way, and think about how far your hand forward is this way or that way to get the right position depending on what you're playing. And I think thinking about those things will help you a lot. Another thing with left hand position to think about is you can see right now my fingers, they're not like all perfectly flat, right? If I'm just doing it, putting all fingers on one string, that's the weird hand shape that happens, right? So you've kind of got to spread your fingers out just a little bit like that. Learning how to do that can kind of help. But it should be pretty relaxed. Basic G chord position. Yeah. So there's my basic G chord position, right? If I take my fingers off, you can see my hand's at a little bit of an angle. Thumbs over the top. And then you can see there's a little bit of space in between my thumb and the back of the neck, right? It's not all the way up against it. Let me see if I can get a little bit better angle on the camera here. First finger kind of on its side, right? It's not, don't try to get everything coming in flat like that. It's actually more like that, right? On the side of the finger. So don't try to play like this because your hand just can't do it. So here, I'm going to press really hard on this string, but you can see right there, right? It's not like that. It's like that. It's at an angle. You can see that's on like the side of my fingertip, right? It's not right in the middle. So, and the same thing with my middle finger, like it's a little bit on the side, okay? Hope that helps some. Do you want to keep going through, want me to keep going through Whiskey Before Breakfast, Kyle, or is there any other thing like with the G chord? Did that help at all? Yeah, pop in the chat, like I said, man, if let me know if that helped, or if that made any sense to you. Take a look at some more of this Whiskey Before Breakfast stuff. Because it looks like they're in the B section. We get on some of the higher strings, and sometimes when you go from like a lower string, you can even see my hand moving. Look, here's where I'm on the lower string. Now watch how my kind of wrist position will just slightly change. Not a lot, right? But here's D string, the wound string, G string. You can see my hand rotated just slightly, right? Watch this wrist right here. Watch when it goes to the B string. Just slightly, not a lot. Right? So your position will vary slightly depending on what string and what fret you're on, but not a whole lot. It helped if you could just play the rest. Cool. Yeah, so let's look there at the B section. Okay, so that's the first measure of the B section. That's just really, moving that ring finger. I don't even know if my wrists move. Barely. Not really though. And right there, I'm kind of playing out of that D chord shape. And so I'm planning that first finger there on the 2nd fret and the middle finger there on the 3rd fret of the B string. Right? So it's like I'm playing this D chord shape. And the only finger that I'm moving is that middle finger. And that makes it just a little bit easier. And then when I get here to the next part that goes kind of on the high D string, the little string, if you can, leave that middle finger down. You'll need to really be on that fingertip though, so it doesn't meet the string below, and you'll need to not have your hand kind of angled that way. It's okay to let it up if you need to. For me, it just makes it a little bit easier since I'm going back to that string. But you can see kind of, my hand just naturally has to drop a little bit to get to that string. I'm not just moving my fingers, right? I'm actually letting my hand drop just slightly for each string. All right, and then the next measure in the B section is over the E minor chord. Yeah. Let me read this really slow, sorry. That's not, is it? That's it. So whenever you're going up a scale, especially if you're getting ready to come back down, so this first little line, ascending line, when we're going from that E minor to the A7 chord, which is measure, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When I go up, I'm not letting that first finger off. I'm not doing first finger, ring finger, pinky. And by the way, that's my suggested fingering to use, so that way you're not having to do this big stretch, right? It's basically first finger here, ring finger here, and then pinky finger there on the 5th fret. But the point I'm trying to get across is leave fingers down so that all you have to do is lift fingers when you descend. So first finger down, then ring finger down, and usually I'll let that middle finger fall as well. You don't want it just tense up there in the air. Alright, so by the time I get to my pinky note, all those fingers are down. So when I want to descend, all I've got to do is let off a finger, or maybe 2 fingers at a time in this case. So, right? So that when I'm descending, let off the pinky, let off those fingers. And that's what will help you get the speed. So you might want to do some single string scales at some point and work on leaving fingers down when you ascend. Like, let's say I'm just going up the D scale right here down at the bottom. Right? When I get to that 3rd finger note, I'm still leaving down my 1st and my middle finger. Alright, next notes in the D scale. Same thing, different string. But then I'm going to leave that 1st finger down, right? And so that way when I go back down, my hand jumps around like this really does help. Irish single string, very, very cool. Yeah, so I think what you've got to do, man, is you've just got to get some self-discipline. And this isn't a personal thing. This is like everybody I've ever taught. You just got to go slow because we all want to play fast. We want to get there, but we've got to build up good muscle memory by just getting it right. The longer you're holding it, think about it like this. It's like lifting a weight. If you just lift a weight one time, it's not going to do a lot for your muscle. But if you're holding a weight out there for 10 seconds, that's engaging that muscle a lot longer. So it's like that when you're going through scales. Try to think of it like that and try to make a good tone too. So if I was I'm going to pretend like I'm working on this D scale and then trying to hold these notes down for a long time to really build up good muscle memory and build good habits, right? So you got to build good habits by doing them a lot. So let's say I'm going through the D scale. Put the 1st finger down. It really is a lot of learning instruments. I've thought about this a lot. Is You kind of got to develop your own internal character. Like as you get better at the instrument, you've got to work on self-discipline. You've got to work on being honest with yourself. Like, is this clean? you know, so you can't just kind of ignore. If you ignore your faults, like you're not going to correct your faults. So it's. I really feel like you kind of got to build your character. To progress in a lot of instances. Like unless I'm not naturally blessed, I don't think. I feel like I had to work pretty hard at it. And I continue to do so, and I feel like most people do. But yes, being honest with yourself, self discipline, um, consistent, like showing up repeatedly, doing that practice even when you don't really want to. And then also trying to like enjoy the process. So like I'm saying, we're playing it slow, so it's not as exciting as right. It's not as exciting as that when you're playing it slow, but try to find a way to make it enjoyable when you play it slow. So try to make a really beautiful tone, right? Don't just play back here, snapping it off. Like try to make it artful. Still be in time, maybe. Add a little bit of vibrato. That's like classical vibrato, where instead of bending the string, kind of going bend down, you kind of go side to side. It's kind of like you just rock your finger back and forth like that. Right? But if I was, like I said, going through this, trying to work on building control, you might even play this whole notes, like put a metronome on at 60. Right? Leave those fingers down once you get to that third finger. Don't lift those up. And so right now I'm getting ready to go to the B string. I could lift all these off and just go to the first string. But a lot of times just leave as many fingers down as possible to get that really ringing sound, and work on that control and engage that muscle for longer, because like I said, that's going to build that muscle, which is going to build strength. It's also going to build muscle memory. Okay, good thing. Right, so there, instead of lifting all fingers off, I'm just moving that first finger. Right, I could have lifted both those fingers and just put that one down, but I'm just going to lift one. A really good exercise, I don't know if you've seen this before, is the spider finger exercise. So let's say, you can do this two ways really. Say we're ascending, let's start it maybe somewhere a little bit easy, like the 7th fret, right? The frets are a little bit closer together here than they are down here, so it's less of a stretch up here. But you go one finger at a time, one finger per fret. And this one, you do need to have a more flat hand position. You can't really do it like that, okay? But I'm leaving all the fingers down, right? Not lifting any fingers. Here's the hard part. Here's where the self-discipline comes in. When you go to the next string, only move your first finger, as long as it takes you. Yep. Whoops. Well, I moved all my fingers. Did you see that? That's bad. That's what we don't want to do. And then you descend as well. See, I've got to work on it too. But that's a really great exercise to work on control. Let me check out some more whiskey before breakfast here. Yeah, I mean, once we got through that hard part on the E minor, it's sort of the same. Here's looking at the next measure. I think this is measure 7. See right there, I could have just like let off right there. But if I leave this middle finger down while I play these two notes that follow it, then it's still there for when I need it, because I'm coming right back to it. In that case, I'd bar that, do a little bar there over that A. We see that too. So I'm just barring those top two strings. See, I could have let off right here, but it's just going to ring out and sound a lot more fluid if you leave it down. And same thing with that middle finger. I'm playing a scale like the 3-3-1-3. The 3-3-1-3. Ooh. Can you describe that a little bit more? I'm not actually sure what you mean by the 3-3-1-3. Playing a scale like the 3-3-1-3. What's the 3-3-1-3? So usually, when you're first learning, you want to develop that control. So you want to leave fingers down as much as possible, unless you need to lift them to play a note. Like, I can't play this note there on the 5th fret if I've got my 3rd finger down in front of it. It's physically impossible. So at that point, you need to lift. But like when learning to scale, I mean, at first, to develop that control, you want to leave fingers down as much as possible. 5, 7, 9 on D. 5, 7, 9 on G. Oh, I see what you're saying. Is that right? That's a big old stretch. To be honest, like that scale, it's good to know that to learn your fretboard, but that specifically, I don't know, I might not actually use that in a lot of songs. Hold on, I'm trying to see exactly this. Yeah, so that's like a A scale. If we're on the, hold on, 5th fret. I went 7th fret. So I'm trying to get the chat pulled up there. Okay, so yeah, 5th fret, G scale. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna play that, I try to leave my fingers down, but you can see this one's such a big stretch, even for me. It's a massive stretch. That's hard. Try to, but I mean, a lot of people might not be able to either because physically they can't do it, but also because of hand posture. You can see when I'm doing it, I'm having to go totally against that rule I told you earlier, where it's usually keep your hand at about that angle. I'm having to go past flat. You can see it's actually angled that way a little bit because I'm actually kind of having to reach back. So I can do it by leaving fingers down, but I've got to get my hand in a not a very uncommon position. And instead of doing 1st finger, 3rd finger, it's a little bit easier on my hand personally to do 1st, 3rd, and then pinky. Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that to how your fretboard's laid out, but that's just an insane stretch. So I really wouldn't use that. A lot of the times if I'm in the 5th fret and going up, I'd probably do this little sliding thing. So instead of doing 3 fingers right there, I'd slide up. So 1st finger, 3rd finger on the 7th fret, slide it up to the 9th fret, then pinky on the 10th fret. That gets you this note that you were playing down here. Then 1st finger on the 7th fret, G string. And then 1st finger, 7th. And then middle finger, 8th. It's just a lot easier because that's like Eddie Van Halen crazy scale. So it's good to know your fingerboard, but it's going to be hard to pull off in a song. If you're practicing it, I would say try a different hand position like I'm showing you. But if it's still too hard, just play it one at a time, I would say. Or at least play this first one and see if you can leave some fingers on, maybe. Or at least try to get them prepared to the next one. Don't just like jump. Like, be reaching out to the next one. So I'm going to let off my first finger there when I play that 9th fret. All right, Kyle. Well, hey, man, thanks for joining me today. You can stick around and ask some more questions. I think there's not a lot of people here today because the link got misposted. So I've got some other stuff I can go over. But if you've got any other questions, I would assume other people have them as well. But feel free to ask any more or whatever you want to do, man. But like I said, so you wouldn't have to necessarily leave the fingers down. So let's say we're doing that 5-7-9, 5-7-9 on the low D and G string. At least before you go, be preparing your finger so it's at least a little bit closer. Maybe not necessarily right over it like this, but like be reaching for it. And the same thing would go as when you're descending. Right? Be getting a little bit closer to it instead of just having it here and then trying to jump. So that'll make it a little bit faster. All right. Let me see. Did we miss anything there in the whiskey before breakfast? Let's see that last measure there. That's a. Make sure to spike that string if you're playing whiskey before breakfast, open D. Yeah, that's pretty much it, man. Like I said, try to leave some fingers down so you can let the notes ring out. And if you get your good hand position, you probably shouldn't be having to move the fingers too much on this song. Maybe a little bit when you change strings. All right. Trying to think if there's any other thing on banjo that I was going to go over. Yeah, mainly just rearranging those rolls. I think is a great thing to do. And then last week, if you want to check out the last live lesson, we talked about accenting different notes in the roll. So let's take that square roll. Usually your thumb is going to be the note you accent just because it's the strongest finger, but you could accent like the middle or the first finger. So let's try to accent the first finger. Right, so it takes the same roll but brings a different note a lot more out front because you're playing that one note harder and the other note softer. So here's usually, most people are probably that thumb note's going to jump out. And sometimes playing that one G note is cool because it's like, even though the chord's changing, that one note becomes more the focus. So if someone's playing lead, having less going on in the background is sometimes a good thing. But like I said, this can apply to rhythm or lead. Right, you could also accent the middle finger. So that'll bring a different note out. Sometimes you want to get a different rhythm with the accent. So with bluegrass, a lot of times you've got the boom chuck or the chop that focuses on the backbeat. And the alternating roll is a great way to kind of accentuate that. But the one you want to accent is when you hit this high string. At least if you're doing the roll the classic way. Right, but if we were doing one of our rolls that we kind of changed the pattern around on it, we accent a different finger, but it would still fall in that backbeat place. So let's say we went away from our regular thumb, index, thumb, middle to our index, thumb, index, index thumb, middle thumb. Yeah. In that case, you're going to accent your middle finger because that's where the backbeat falls. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E. And the accent, it just has to be louder than the other notes. It doesn't have to be like super, super hard. So you can still provide a little bit of rhythmic feel as a backup player without being so loud that you're competing with the volume level of whoever's taking the lead at a jam. So you can still do. Right, and then also, move a little bit closer to the neck, probably if they've got a really bright tone. Sometimes if they have a dark tone, it might be good to just play soft back near the bridge. Right, contrast is always good. If they're playing licks way up high, it's good to play these chords low. But if they're playing low stuff, you probably want to go up the neck. All right, so contrast is always a good thing to think about when playing in a group. All right, I'm gonna put the banjo down unless you got any more questions, Kyle, man. I'm here for you. So right now, like I said, something happened with the link, and so I don't think we got the people that were planning to be here. So I'm gonna go over a couple things on guitar. If you want to hang out with me, man, feel free. A lot of this stuff, just because they're all string fretted instruments, a lot of the concepts can kind of be applied from one to another. For example, we were just talking about on banjo how if you pick up near the neck, you get that more smooth sound. It's not as bright, but if you pick near the bridge, it's bright. Same exact thing on guitar, same thing on mando. And that was something I was planning on talking today about guitars, is just tone production and thinking about your different tone. And we're going to talk about something with the pick that applies to guitar, but definitely applies to banjo as well. So yeah, with guitar, let's say whether you're playing rhythm or lead, if you're near the neck, it's more dark. It's not as bright versus, and that's just your attack placement, right? But something else you can do with guitar is your pick angle can also control the tone. So, and like I said, this could apply to banjo just as well. So if you've got a really flat pick, it's really going to be a nice, smooth, even tone most of the time. But if you turn this pick at an angle, let's see if you can see it right here, like that, it's going to darken your tone up. So flat's usually the brightest it can be, for whatever position you're playing in, whether you're here or here. That's the brightest it can be right there, probably. But if I turn it at a little bit of an angle, look, I'm playing it the same place, immediately darker. So having that angled pick can sometimes get you a really cool tone. It's just another tool, another color you have in your palette to paint with, basically. So pick attack placement and pick angle are two great things to control the tone of your guitar. Another thing I wanted to talk about with guitar is how you attack it. All right. So if you pick out, it's usually going to be a rather thin sound, right? There's probably some scientific explanation of the physics of how you set a string in motion. One way it gives this sort of frequency or whatever. I don't know. But I just know if you pick out like this, usually not going to be a very big sound. But if you do a rest stroke, so let's say I'm going to set my pick on top of the B string, and I'm going to pick through it, right? And it'll come to rest on the E string. That's usually how I'm going to get my best and biggest sound, because it kind of just sets it in a motion vibrating this way versus this way, which is usually not as strong. right? A lot bigger sound that way. And then you could still do also a rest stroke with an angled pick. Change your tone as well. So rest strokes are really good if you want a really big note. Like usually when I'm trying to finish off a G run, I'll do a rest stroke because that'll give me my strongest note. Versus picking out, not as strong, stronger note. All right. And then also when you're doing longer notes, stuff that's maybe got a little bit more sustain and you're not just flat picking, you know, like Blackberry Plaza. That's going so fast that you can't really do rest strokes. But let's. That's out of tune, isn't it? But yeah, so that rest stroke just allows me to get a nice big note. Even though I'm not playing fast, I'm going to have a big, good tone, right? Versus kind of thin, kind of sickly, right? This gets the top activated, starts sounding good. All right, so use those rest strokes. I think we talked about this last week, but those are great for your walking bass as well, okay? If you want strong walking bass. Sometimes you might not want as loud of a walking bass if the backup you're playing is a little bit more gentle, depending on however your lead player is playing, right? With mandolin today, I think I'm going to try to break down a little bit of the Sam Bush rhythm style. So I know how to play it. It's fairly complex. We'll see if I can explain some of it, but a lot of it revolves around these open chords and left hand muting. And then sometimes you pick low strings for a low kind of boom. Sometimes your chucks on the up strings, but it'll sound something like. Alright, so that's a big thing Sam will do a lot is slide into this A chord, and instead of doing like this bar chord or the classic bluegrass chop, a lot of the times he'll do this where he slides in. My first finger is in between the G and the D string, and he'll slide in. You don't want to stay here too long. Sometimes you can, it sounds cool, but most of the time he just does it pretty quick. Alright, so slide in on the low ones, and then upstroke on the high, and then a quick mute. So a lot of the times, that left hand just laying down, but the right hand stays in motion. And usually if I do hit upstroke, it's not going to last very long. I'm not. And a lot of his songs, to be fair, it may. But for getting the more kind of rhythmic sound, those quick mutes. Is I don't know, maybe a little bit more signature to how he plays. And then the other thing I'm doing is adding in these little lifts and hammer-ons with these chords. Talked about this last week, how you can take a simple G chord and just decorate it up by leaving one finger off and then hammering it down. A good exercise might just be to take a boom chuck pattern and use your left hand mute. So we're gonna left hand to mute your chuck. So we're gonna boom on the low strings. Then right after you hit these two high strings, I'm not hitting the whole chord when I do this for my chuck. My boom's on the low two, my chuck's on the high two. Right after you hit the high two, you're gonna let these other left hand fingers come down. That's a little bit more sand there. So instead of just doing boom chuck, we're gonna do boom. We're muting right after the chuck, and then there's a quick upstroke which we're doing the mute on as well. So it'll be like. I'm gonna slow this way down. You can see when I'm lifting it, I'm not lifting way up here, right? Just minimal, just enough to get out of the way of the string's vibration. Right, and your chuck, sometimes it can just be one string. I'm a humongous Sam Bush fan, have been all my life, way before I actually got into traditional bluegrass. So if any of you tune foxers want to talk about Sam Bush, let's do it, because he's definitely a hero of mine. All right, well, hope to see some of you guys next week. Please join in, give me your questions, and I'm going to help you in every way I can, okay? We'll see you guys next week. Bye.